what transferable skills from your past experience did you highlight when interviewing for UX roles? So if you could just touch on what you were doing before and how you use those skills when interviewing.
Before I was working as an insurance agent, but I had a background in like graphics. I wanted to get into design or back into design. And then what was the other question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, how did you apply that experience? Like, when you're interviewing and you have to talk about something other than like the 3 projects you've done in UX UI design, how did you like relate your past experience to UX UI design?
Gotcha. I have a lot of customer service experience, and so just being able to talk to people in general was a really big point. Also, working in insurance, I did deal with a lot of like frantic or maybe not the most pleasant people. And so being able to talk about de-escalating or being able to kind of like just communicate, like communication is always like the answer to almost all of the questions that they'll ask. But like in situations where it can be tense or people are not agreeing, just being able to have those sort of like de-escalation skills, I definitely have like brought into interviews.
So before this, like I said before, I was a social worker. So I was a clinical social worker working in child welfare. So I, really like sold myself in these interviews, which sounds weird, but like, really like talking about like my skills and my experience. And I actually really wanted to work for a teletherapy company because of my social work experience. So when I was going through this interview process or the interview process with my current company, because they are a pediatric teletherapy company and my background was social work with children, I was really able to talk about how I've utilized my skills of empathy, really understanding others and understanding their problems, trying to help them solve those problems, and how with that experience, I'm shifting that to UX and understanding users and their problems and trying to eliminate their, barriers and things like that. Like Tyler said, communication is extremely important. It kind of really is like the answer to all like the questions and problems that will come up. Really being able to collaborate and be a team player. Within my role in social work, for example, I worked with like teachers and therapists and attorneys and, all these different providers. So there's a lot of different ways that you can transfer your skills, even if you don't think it's relevant. Like my skills and my experience were more beneficial for my position because they're a pediatric teletherapy company. But really, in any job, you're really using communication skills, problem solving, and most of the time you have to be empathetic, especially if you're working with people, you have to be empathetic in any job you do. So there are a lot of transferable skills that I think people just don't really realize just because it's not related to tech or design.
Yeah. So yeah, my job was obviously not anything tech related. I was a high school band director for 7 years, but I found that my skills actually are very transferable. I just need to understand how they see it in the corporate world, right? And not in the educational world where things are so different. And, but I will say, I know that we had one of that Microsoft Reach program with CJ, and talking to one of those designers, he actually told me that being a teacher, if anything, could be a good thing. And it's something that you should actually highlight as you're interviewing, because you have a different set of skills, dealing with students, parents, other adults, attention to detail, right? Because I've taught kids how to play music and go through it, something that takes a long process. And so there are a lot of skills that I had that maybe other candidates wouldn't have. Even as running a band program, I have to think about budgets. There are meetings with different instructors that we used to have for the band program. So there's a lot of different skills. It's just that it might be called something different in your field of work. It's obviously definitely very different, but almost every skill I think that I use on a day-to-day basis, I've used at some point in my previous career as well. It's just maybe in a different way.
Yeah, and I think we try and highlight some of that in the Career Jumpstart program when you work on your resume, right? And like you start thinking about, I don't know if you all have been around, but we introduced an activity that's like about me, which seems really simple, but like we have you all like write down your little like elevator speech, and we have a career coach that literally works on like making your past experience relevant to the jobs you're applying to, right? And we do the same thing with the resume, right? We tell you to pull up like all of the job descriptions and find words that designers use to describe the work you've actually done. You can talk about communication as a teacher, you can talk about empathy, like all of the things you all touched on, like Tyler, right? De-escalating difficult situations. All of those things are easily transferable. So that's great.